Today, I'm joined by social media expert, keynote speaker, and host and owner of the podcast launchlab.com, Sebastian Rusk. Welcome to the show.
Mark, what's up, dude?
I am happy to be here. I'm glad to be here with you, a fellow South Floridian. Jonathan Palmer said, I got to talk to Sebastian Rusk. He's doing big things down here. And you're working now with Shay, who is the queen of LinkedIn. I'm curious, how did you get linked up with Shay?
Dude, it's a crazy, crazy, crazy story. And shout out to Johnny Palmer, total stud, aka Fabio.
He does. He's got a great head of hair. I got to get him props for that.
Totally, I have serious hair envy. Serious hair envy. So I've been following Shay for probably about a year now, and it was, well, I guess earlier this year. I thought I got to get her on the show, and she's in Miami too. This is going to be a slam dunk. I can get, like, Gary V's my mentor. Like, I pinned him down 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I can get a hold of anybody. And not so much with Shay. Like, there's several layers there that because she insulates herself well with her team, so it's tough to get to her. So I had messaged her several times, and then her team came back to me with like an application to fill out to be on the show, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. There's a better way. So one of my my breath work coach, Gina, yeah, I met at Equinox about 2.5 years ago, and she introduced me to her friend Dominic. Dominic's a inner peace advisor is his title. So he's a healer coach, etc. And he hired me too to launch his podcast. And we were sitting down to talk about his podcast probably in, I don't know, early January. And he said, I'm working with this LinkedIn influencer. And I said, I know you probably can't tell me, but is her name Shay? And he's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, dude, I've been looking for her like the DA looking for child support. And he goes, yeah, that's not a problem. I'll set that up. And a day later, I had new appointment request from Shay. So I just opened the podcast Launch Lab studio here in Coral Gables. And when she booked the appointment, and I said, hey, listen, you're in Miami. Let's meet up. I mean, this is pre-COVID, so it was, people met up and stuff, the good old days. And I said, I just opened a podcast studio. I'd love to have you as the first guest in the studio. And she's like, lit, let's do it. And I go, let's do it. So she goes, how's Friday? And I go, Friday works. And originally it was supposed to be like 2 p.m. And then she hits me up and she's like, hey, listen, I'm a little jammed up. Can we do it at 7 p.m.? And I said, on a Friday. Nice. She said, yes. And I said, I don't like to work past 3 on a Monday, let alone Friday. She goes, this isn't work, dude. We're going to have a blast. It's going to be lit, dude, were her exact words. And I go, all right, let's do it. And I go, we'll go grab a beer after. She's like, let's do it. So then I was a little bit more enrolled into the process. So she shows up here and we had a great conversation. It was the first interview that I did here in the studio. And then we stayed in touch. I did put a bug in her ear that night and said, hey, listen, I know you're crushing LinkedIn and you've built a platform. You've done great and everything, but there's still more to be done. And part of that process is definitely starting a podcast. So you let me know when you're ready, but I think you're ready now. She's like, no, totally. I'll chat. It's in the plans, et cetera, and kind of had blown it off. And then we had stayed in touch, and she hit me up about a month ago and said, hey, listen, so I've decided to tell the story of my childhood, like the trauma and all the crazy shit that happened. And I want to do it through means of a podcast. And you're my obvious choice. And I said, well, I'm honored and excited at the same time. And she came to me with a level of enthusiasm that I had not seen from her. Like, we hit it off the bat, and I feel like I've known her forever and a day. She's like family now, but she came with a different tone and a different level of, like, she was almost, I want to say she was serious because she's, we're always cracking up and cracking jokes and high energy, etc. But she came and said, I need to tell this story and I want to do it via a podcast. And once I tell the story, then I'm going to have some strategic guests on that have been through, some crazy things too, and been able to overcome them, because I believe this is going to help people heal and it's going to help the world, etc. And I said, let's do it. So she hired me here at the Podcast Launch Lab to walk her through our program. At first she was like, my team can do the program. And I said, no. You and I are going to do this launch, and then we're going to weave your team into the process so everyone understands what they're going to be doing, etc. But you're the voice, you're the show, you're the face, you're the brand, and I need you to absorb everything that I'm teaching you so that we can maximize this opportunity. So she goes, you know what? I'm in. She gave me a teeny tiny bit of resistance throughout the whole process, but minor. And in fact, she said the other day when I had her on the show for the launch, that the reason that she hired me was because she knew that I just wasn't going to take any bullshit. I just was going to hold her feet to the fire, hold her accountable. And it's like, if we're going to do this, let's do this. And I want to do it my way because, well, I have a proven way of getting it done. And she loved that part. So we're going to, the good news is the show is launched with its first 8 episodes, which is nuts. Our program is normally the first 5 episodes, but well, with Shay, I bent the rules a little bit because she's like, I want to start with 10 episodes. And I was like, all right, overachiever. And she ended up launching with 8. And the good news is the Podcast Launch Lab is going to continue to produce the Shay Rowbottom Show from now until infinity. So we got a real special thing going on, because anytime Shay even mentions the Podcast Launch Lab, our phone rings, or I get a message, or a random DM, or something crazy happens. So it's really turned into not only a really beautiful friendship, but a beautiful business relationship. And we run in a real small circle of individuals that are really adamant about being as conscious as possible and being able to be as present as possible with life, and to be very adamant about making sure that we're doing work that actually matters while loving and supporting each other. And then, our fellow man, especially during times like this. So yeah, man, that's the Shay story.
There's definitely a lot to unpack there. And I think
Yeah.
that for me, the big takeaway is you're only one person away, right?
Sure.
You might not have direct access to that dream guest or that dream person, that dream mentor, like your Gary Vee or Shay Rowbottom, your Tony Robbins, whoever it is. But one of the most powerful aspects of starting a podcast is the ability and the strength of building your network. And that's something that's been amazing for me, guys. I've had the opportunity to interview celebrities, presidential candidates, professional athletes. I've shaken hands with people that I never would have had the chance to have met.
Sure.
And it's a really powerful thing. So I want to just kind of ask you, what got you into podcasting? Because obviously you've been in the game creating digital media for a long time, but the Podcast Launch Lab is still a fairly new project. If I might say, it seems like you've started just within the last couple of years or so. What made you say, this is where the industry is going? I need to start teaching people how to get into podcasting because it's so important. What was that aha moment for you, Sebastian?
Well, I think in an effort to add as much context as possible and give some backstory to how I arrived in launching the Podcast Launch Hub, which was at the end of 2016.
Okay.
So I'll walk you through that process. So the Reader's Digest 30,000 foot perspective is that I lived in Southern California until 2008. The market crashed out there, lost everything. I'm a full-time single dad. So I grabbed a duffel bag and my daughter moved back to Miami, which is where I grew up, in 2008. Then everything crashed here. So from 2008, 2010, I was just a degenerate and an absolute menace to society, meaning I just did nothing at all. Like, what do you do? I'm like, nothing. Like, I drink Milwaukee's best beer and
Oh no.
Yeah, the beast, baby, the beast. And then in 2010, I had this awakening moment. And I've always been a Tony Robbins fan. And I told myself, I need to go see Tony Robbins. I need to go awaken the giant within. We're going to go walk on fire, baby. Let's go. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. How are we going to make this happen? I said, well, let me back up. Okay, who do I know that's in Tony's circle? I know one of his good sales reps, and I also know his son. So his son wasn't working with him anymore, so he wasn't the guy to call about the details. But I did call his one of his sales reps, who's a good friend of mine. And she's like, yeah, here's the details. It's in July, Long Beach, etc. Unleash the power within. It'll be great. Walk on fire. So I wrote it down. I've got it on the board. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, goal number 1 of moving back. This is where chapter 2 starts. And she called me right back about 15 minutes later. And she goes, I forgot to tell you that I want to introduce you to my best friend who lives on Miami Beach. She's actually part of Tony's core team of 6 people, and she travels with him and be a great contact for you. And I said, perfect. So she introduced me to her, and I had sent her a video that I had shot for my consulting businesses. I'm trying to pull myself out of the mud and figure out what's next here. And she goes, I love that video. Your energy was nuts. And you should start a YouTube channel. Like, what are you doing next? And I said, we'll chat more about it when we grab a drink on Friday. So we did that. And she sat across from me. I'll never forget. We were at Fridays on 5th and Washington on Miami Beach, sitting right outside in the patio, and when people could go to restaurants. And did I go there? And she said, so what's next? And I said, I don't know. And the PG version of her response was, that's a problem. Okay. That's a problem. And I'm like, okay, cool. So this girl's cussing at me and she's offending me. I'm offended now, because at that point I was the victim of victims, capital V. And she goes, and here's why it's a problem, Sebastian. I'm like, oh, you're going to get all Tony Robbins on that ass, right? She's like, no, the problem is you not knowing what's next or not being willing to move into the right direction of what is next, it's not about you or what you're missing out of. It's what is the world missing out of from Sebastian because you're not showing up.
Hmm.
You sent me that video. You can start a YouTube channel. There's a lot of buzz around social media. You've been in the social media space since 2004. Why don't screwing around on MySpace? Why don't you just start something that will help people and start a business from it? And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of buzz around social media, social buzz. So, hey, social buzz TV. So I sent that to a designer who came back to me on that Monday with a logo. So I started running around town telling people I'm starting the biggest, baddest social media company to educate people about social media, to help you out with social media, all the above in 2010. So this is foreign language to most 90% of
It
people.
seems
So I started
obvious looking back, but you're right. Back in 2010, social media,
totally
podcasting was still very much under the radar, especially the idea of being a career
taboo.
YouTuber. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And also, I haven't needed this for the past 30 years. Don't come to what is this Twitter that you
Right.
speak of, right? So I continued to evangelize my message. I didn't have any money, didn't have a car. I had a skateboard and I had a bus pass. So I firmly believe I was taught a long time ago that if you not fake it till you make it, that's bullshit and terrible advice. But if you act as if you act as if you play the part long enough, I firmly believe that you become the part. I really, really do. And it conditions you to be able to sustain the part, right? So I continued to show up at networking events. Then I started to do my own networking events. Then I would invite sponsors and give them a table and hang your banner up. Then I started to create a process of, well, I've seen you at a networking event. I've been to your networking event. I've sponsored your networking event. D all the above. I think I need to take a closer look at this social media and I want to hire you. So a year into Social Buzz TV, I opened the Social Buzz Media Group, which is our agency that helps brands create their social media strategy. And at that point in time, we did everything. We'll set up your Facebook, we'll run your Facebook, we'll create content, we'll watch your freaking kids on the weekend. We'll do it all as long as you have a budget. And I quickly learned that that's a terrible, terrible strategy
Yeah.
because the less they pay, the more of a nightmare they are, right? So what I didn't realize I was doing simultaneously is building my personal brand because I started wearing bow ties and I started really branding myself as Sebastian Rusk with Social Buzz TV. And I got a book deal in 2013. I wrote my first book, Social Media Sucks If You Don't Know What You're Doing. And I told this story that I'm telling you right now. And then I also gave up my perspective on where I thought we're at, where I thought we were at the time and where we're headed with this whole social media thing. Now, again, Gary's been my mentor from the get. Like 2010, I met Gary. So I followed his blueprint from crush it all the way through to present day now,
Mhm.
right? So after the book came out, I started to get speaking gigs. I started to MC and host events. I started to do brand endorsements and things of that nature before this whole influencer wave started to happen. I felt that I was part of creating that movement because I would go to brands and pitch them with crazy ideas like, hey, give me a car for the weekend and send me some free bow ties. I'll create content and talk to you, talk about you and tag you. And people are like, this is brilliant. I mean, now it's pretty common behavior here, but so that 2013 to 2016, I was still trying to figure out where, my place in this world, even though I was at it. And I struggled a lot with how long is this going to take? How long is this going to take? And I eventually just wrote it off to like, it's going to take as long as it's going to take. And then in March of 2016, I met a girl on Tinder and she introduced me to a personal development course. She lived in Fort Lauderdale, up in Las Olas, right where I used to live, way back when. So it was kind of nostalgic to be back up there. But she tried to get me into this course, and I'm like, I'm not doing it. Like I am personal development. All right, babe. I don't need personal development. Okay? I am. I walk on fire, baby. Landmark Forum, check plus on that. But the bottom line is we're never done learning ever. We only have a lifetime to figure this out. So she eventually got me into that program, broke up with me in the middle of it, and I was devastated and blah, blah, blah. But that program literally revolutionized my life personally and allowed me to look into myself and really check in and evaluate and go back to the childhood and go back to the trauma and be able to address everything and find out what stories I created and who I was blaming along the way to be able to create the lens that I was looking through and why I hated myself so much and why I was so enraged. So that program revolutionized who I was as an individual. I learned how to love myself. I learned to be not codependent. I learned a series of things that happened.
Well, it's really
But
hard
when you're
to kind of execute on that self-awareness, right? It seems like so often when we ask people for their opinions, it's just you're doing great or I don't
right,
get it or whatever. So actually getting deep and getting underneath that skin level is super important. It's honestly it's
it is.
probably one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur is for that exact same reason. People don't want to
Well,
give
it's
you
the
their
world
honest
that we're
opinion.
Yeah, it's the world that we're living in, though.
Yeah.
We live in a society, in a world where it's okay to say, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna sell you my bullshit, and then you sell me yours, and we're gonna call it a
Yeah.
deal."
Follow for
And
follow,
that's just the
sub
wo
for sub, just that kind of,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Instead of really going, "Hey, like, what, you good? Like, what's going on?" So, when I got out of that program, which is extreme, man, it's painful, it's messy, it's dark, it's nuts, man, to look inward. Most don't wanna do it, so we suppress and run, right? I chose to take it on head on because I knew, Mark, that if I was going to take my business to the next level, if you're going to build a sustainable long-term brand that turns into a legacy, you have got to be the right person in order to do that.
Mm.
If you're not in tune with yourself, checked in and aware of what's going on and conscious of the work that you're actually doing, you're just going to screw it all up. If you're angry in your personal life, you're going to be angry in business. If you're bitter in your personal life, who you are in here is who you are out there. I heard a long time ago, and I firmly, believe that. But I decided to leverage, again, had another awakening moment, just like the Tony Robbins moment when I got done with gratitude training and I was done with the breakup and I had, wiped my tears and taken my tail out from between my legs and was like, okay, I'm no longer a victim. I'm ready to show up for myself and for life. And I want to do it through means of starting a podcast, or I want to do it through means of helping people start a podcast. Now, I didn't know that was going to be the route, but right at that same time frame, I ran into a friend in this same building that my studio's in, but on the 5th floor, and she had a show on an internet radio show, and she could never tell me how good it was doing because she just didn't know. It was just like internet radio. I'm like, what is that? It's not serious. It's not AM radio. It's like, what is that? You should start a podcast. This is a waste of time. And she said, well, I don't know how to do that. Why don't you create a solution that helps people do that? So I literally went back upstairs and I took out 3 sheets of paper and I mapped out my entire process from 2011 to 2016 on how I started and stopped my podcast 3 times, how I had a radio show and I bailed from the radio show to go back to podcasting because I had more freedom with it. And then I started to evangelize, just like I did with Social Buzz TV, the Podcast Launch Lab. Podcast Launch Lab is a 90-day program that helps you go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less. I coach you. My team does the work. You record the episodes and you launch your podcast. So it took me about 18 months after that to figure out who my ideal client was. And I realized that in like December of last year, I started to get real clear that my ideal client is a marketer, somebody just like myself, a marketer, an entrepreneur, author, speaker, coach, a person of authority that knows their natural next step is to start a podcast. So, and when I figured that out, I'm like, oh, wow. So if that's the case, we need to go find 100 marketers and entrepreneurs in 2020 and help them start a podcast. That is the mission, because if we do that, we're going to have a podcast network by default, but we're going to have one heck of a community and also some social proof that obviously I know what I'm talking about.
So
But I have to get serious.
let's kind of reframe this just a little bit before we move
Sure,
on to the next point, because you're bringing up a lot of good stuff here, Sebastian. So,
sure.
firstly, you said, okay, there's a need here. People are asking me for a solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a system, right? So you put in place a system that fixes this problem that exists, right? So we find the
Right.
problem, we create a solution, we put in place systems, and now you're going into sales mode. Right now, you're going to sales mode. Now you're trying to bring people to your business and to your podcast solution. So,
Sure.
how does that look like? How do we get from 0 to 100? Like, how are we going to make that happen?
Right. So we're not anywhere close to 100, and we're halfway through the year, but the Rona. But a lot of people are still starting podcast, and we're, with deals like with Shay and, just based on, existing clients and the word spreading and podcast being popular, I think it's still very much possible. But, I found that I did a marketing campaign a couple months ago, funnels, ads. It was, nothing. It's people that don't know me, don't buy from me. The end. If you've seen me speak, bought my book, or watched videos, or you've come referred to me, you're going to enroll. It's just the way that it is. So, getting to 0 to 100 is, just believe. I believe it's believing in what I'm doing and being completely certain with it. I am on mission to help people go from idea to iTunes, to tell their story, to impact other people's lives and enroll them in their community, to be able to contribute and provide value and pour into people's lives. So that's really what I see as far as, I don't know if I answered the question right there,
Well,
but
so I'm
getting
I'm
from
trying to
0 to
think,
100.
like, how are we going to bring people into our circle, right? I think a lot of people said, "Oh, we're just going to post a few Facebook ads and we're going to have a high profit
Social proof.
product." And so we look at the social proof. Testimonials are a big deal,
Yes.
I think,
Yep.
right? And how are you outreaching? How are you finding people to network with?
They're,
You just get on the
you know,
phone. Like, obviously now in the days of coronavirus, you can't just go start knocking on doors and showing up at businesses. So how are you finding people?
They're finding me, dude. It's
Okay.
really I mean, I wish I could describe it. And it's also strategic deals like with Shay and people that have authority already that say, hey, listen, I did it. You need to do it.
Yeah.
So doing that, I'm working on my second book. I'm almost done with it. Podcasts suck if you don't know what you're doing. So I'm excited about that because when you write a book, it's not about selling books. Your book becomes your new business card, and your book becomes another piece of social proof, and you're automatically looked at as an authority and expert.
Well, and
Because
podcasts
you,
work the same way. Like you said, people start coming to you. I probably get 1 to 2 to 3 messages a week of people that wanna hire me for something. Quite frankly, I turn down almost everyone, or I'll give them a price that's really high because, like you said earlier in our conversation, you can't get bogged down with all that service stuff, right? You gotta say if
sure.
my time is incredibly valuable. But
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit to all the business owners out there that don't have a podcast yet, right? That maybe say, I don't know if this is for me. Does this really work? Nobody actually listens to this stuff. Why should every single business owner have some sort of podcast experience for their clients and fans?
So if I called you 25 years ago and I said, hey, Mark, I have an opportunity for your dry cleaning business to have a radio show, what would you say to me?
I'd probably
A
say I
radio
listen to
show.
radio every morning on the way to work. That sounds
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. So let's have a conversation. You're not going to tell me nobody listens to the radio. This isn't going to be of a benefit. There's no audience there. You're not going to tell me that. Now, in the midst of all of this, the people that are the closest to me, my attorney, my best friend, my people, family, people in my circle have told me that without a shadow of a doubt, I am 100% out of my tree and completely delusional to the fact that podcasting is even something and is going anywhere. So, in addition to selling something where there's yet again, here I am again, it's round two of learning curve of what is a podcast again?
Right.
Just like I was in the beginning, but it's okay. I'm well primed now because if I made it through the hey, look at me over here, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, to where we're at with present day, the bottom line is podcasting is replacing radio,
Mm.
traditional radio, as we know it. No one is excited or is anticipating running to their car to turn on an FM dial to hear the same song played over again with your less than favorite DJ talking over the music. And then right after the song that's played 100 times is yet another ad from Don Mealy Chevrolet that no one cares about. No one has listened to an ad on the radio and said, you know what, it's time for a new car. Unless, of course, you're sitting on the side of 95 and your car's broken down. But podcasting provides, there's less frictionless. It's a less frictionless
Mm.
experience. And when you look at where streaming and podcasting is coming together, I mean, if you haven't noticed that Spotify is absolutely playing Pac-Man in the marketplace to put their stake in the ground and go, listen, we are the leading source for podcasting and anything streaming music, right? I believe eventually you'll be able to have one turnkey solution that allows you to stream your movies, your music, and your podcast all in one spot. We've got a device that does that through 3 different apps, but they're close to where it's at. But we're living in, Gary talks about this a lot. We're living in this audio era. If you don't believe me, just go ask Alexa to do something for you, right?
Yeah, well, I mean,
It's
every
crazy.
every time I sit in my car, it's exactly the same experience you're talking about, Sebastian. I'm either turning on my Spotify app to listen to a podcast I listen to, or maybe
Yep.
I put on YouTube and I just listen to a podcast style YouTube show while I'm sitting in my car. It's just so much more efficient. It's so much more catered, so much more specialized. Like you said, I don't need to listen to a random ad about some product or service that I really don't care about. If I if the host is doing it right, I am listening to ads, the ads are specifically catered to something that is going to help me improve my life.
For
You
sure.
really hit on a key point there, Sebastian.
Rogan goes for 10 minutes with ads before the episode even starts. I mean, again, it's Rogan, so I don't suggest doing that.
Well, and they're
But it's
interesting too because he puts his own
there.
spin on the ad because he knows
Right.
what his listeners want, right?
Sure.
It,
Sure. Sure.
it's just it's incredibly powerful. I do find it somewhat interesting though when I speak to older generations and they say, "Hey, Mark, I caught your video podcast," and they just saw like a quick little 2-minute live video. So I think there is still somewhat of a disconnect in what
Yeah.
exactly a podcast is, but
Sure.
with every single day that goes by, people are going to get it. It's like this wave is happening and people don't fully understand or comprehend it. Have you ever run into that where you're speaking to a business owner, you're like, listen, you need to have a podcast. It's a direct link. You're able to establish yourself as an expert in the marketplace. And have you had to
Yep.
overcome those objections with people to kind of help you, like, shake them by the neck and say, "Listen, you got to take this seriously"?
No, no. Gary told me a long time ago to never pay any attention to the naysayers and the people that are doubting where we're at with all of this. He's famously quoted probably 10 years ago that social media is overthrowing governments in the Middle East. Do you really have the audacity to think it's not affecting your business? And there's never been more. I put it on my email signature. It was such a great. I told him that's absolute gold, and it's so true too. Because I don't care who you are, you can't argue with that statement. You just can't argue with where we're at with all of this. And it's been around for 17 years now. It's not going anywhere. Podcasting, almost 2002, it came out. It started becoming popular in 2008. Now there's only a million podcast episodes in existence right now, only. But let's use some comparison for a second. If we look at YouTube, which by the way, I've been going all in with for the past 18 months, youtube.com/podcast launch lab. And YouTube has 15 million creators on it. So 15 million creators, 1 million podcasts. And we don't even know if all those podcasts are active.
Right.
Statistics would tell us that the average podcast doesn't make it past the 6th episode before it makes its way to the podcast graveyard. So I think there's going to be a lot of start-stop process. But as far as business owners understanding why they need to start a podcast, why would you want to start a radio show 25 years ago? Well, I could gain exposure. I'm introduced to a new audience. I've got the ability to market my product or business to this existing audience that's clearly bigger than my community. So think about that in the perspective of modern day, which is, what does it look like to record a podcast episode? Well, what's that going to allow me to do? Well, if I create a podcast episode and I start to build a community around that, which are my customers, my clients, or new people that listen to the content, I'm becoming an authority because, it just, for perception, it's like, first of all, well, that's cool. I had no idea that an insurance company would have a podcast, let alone a podcast studio. They got some really, and they talk
Sure.
about things that have nothing to do with insurance. It's
Sure.
so, it's so neat, as my mom would say. And, they're also becoming a media company, right? So what does it look like once you've built that community, you've built the show out, and you are an insurance company, and you've got another local business that wants to sponsor your show, and then you've monetized your podcast, and now you literally have become a media company. So your podcast pays for itself and is a revenue generator way outside any of the insurance premiums that you collect. So I think it's about becoming a media company and also archiving your life and your brand, rather, and your business. So people see that, they look back, and they, instead of saying, go see my crappy website, it's like, hey, go check out our YouTube channel and see what we've been up to for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
We got a podcast, we got a YouTube channel. That's social proof right there. I think that in conjunction with people saying great things about you via testimonials is a win-win.
Well, and I think that the coronavirus outbreak has really brought a lot of these problems right to the head, right in front of us, because there's
Yep.
all these problems that in these changes that we expected to be happening over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, and all of a sudden it's here now. We've got parents and teachers teaching from school. You've got all these restaurants shut down. Gym owners are trying to figure out online video content. So you got to start now. I feel really scared for a lot of business owners out there that don't fully adapt, or at least start developing new sources of income, alternative ways of meeting and linking up with clients. So I think that you're doing really great work over there at the Podcast Launch Lab, helping people launch on iTunes.
Yeah.
And
Yep, man.
finish
It's
what you're
it's
doing.
right. Now's the time to do it, though. And a
Yes.
lot of people got caught with their pants down when COVID hit.
Yeah.
It was like, oh
And it's
man, I
not too
guess I
late.
could have.
It's not too late, right? Like,
Definitely not to. But now's the time to recognize that you didn't build the community online when you were forced to be closed and couldn't communicate. Now you have nothing online. Now's the time to figure something out. So in the event something crazy happens again, which it will, in some form or fashion, it's always good to just be prepared and realize, wait a second, I can connect with people offline and online. Why would you make it difficult? I mean, there's still people that, I had a meal delivery company uh, running ads on Instagram, and I went to go to their website, and it brought me to WhatsApp. And I'm like, what is this? I'm like, do you guys have a menu? They sent me a picture of the menu, and they go, you can order here.
yeah,
I go, where? Like right here in the DMs. And I'm like, it's 2020,
it's
right?
just not that hard. It just, honestly, to me, it shows a lack of effort, a lack of initiative, because it's not that hard. It takes a little bit of effort, but it's not that hard to set up some forms on a website that's clean, that's mobile
Sure.
friendly. And honestly, it's like you said before, systems. You got to put systems in place. So Sebastian, before I let you go, I just want to remind everyone, check out Sebastian at the podcast Launch Lab. If you're in South Florida, he's got a great facility, physical facility that you can visit. But I want to get into a couple quick rapid fire questions here for you, Sebastian, real
Sure.
fast. All right. So first question would be, what is a must-have business item for less than $25? What could you not do without?
Um, I would say for 25 bucks. Huh. Gosh, man, that's like real-time Jeopardy. God, I'm buying gadgets. I'm a gadget. I mean, this whole studio is laced out with every gadget on the planet. I would say I'm looking at it right here. My nifty iPad um, tripod
Tripod.
right here. It bends and whatnot. These are like 15 bucks. And I got sports are starting again. So instead of, trying to keep myself in the studio and productive here, I got a little TV going on here. But yeah, I think that would be for 25 bucks. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do a lot of
How
stuff
much
with
you
a tripod. I'm with you there. If you woke up in the morning, there was only one business related task you could do for the day, what would you do?
help people discover their why?
Okay, dig it. And last but not least, if you had a billboard message that could reach millions and millions of people, what do you put on your billboard, Sebastian?
Podcasts suck if you don't have one. Podcastlaunchlab.com.
Love it. Sebastian, thank you so much for your time, brother. Thanks for spreading knowledge.
No, it's my pleasure, dude. Thanks for having me on.